I want to make sure that if this piece of legislation goes forward, and we'll support this going to law amendments, that if this goes forward and goes through the full process, that those healthcare workers are protected, and especially that oath of office that physicians take here in the province and in the country to protect their relationship with their patients, Mr. Speaker. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I hope that this process we see an involvement from not only law enforcement but from the medical field, Mr. Speaker, and those physicians that are going to be affected by this, and those healthcare workers be affected by this. But also, I hope that the government sought legal advice on this, on those parameters around the ethical nature of this and what we're asking our healthcare providers to do, Mr. Speaker. So we will support this to go to law amendments. I hope that we get some reassurance that those interest groups have been talked to and that they'll have input through the process of this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. We have arrived at the moment of interruption. We'll return to Bill number 10 after the late show this evening. The adjournment debate has been chosen as announced earlier and won by the Honourable Member for Halifax-Shabukto. The resolution for debate this evening, therefore, to be resolved that in light of record high prices on home heating fuel, as winter is upon us, it is urgent for this government implement an immediate and appropriate program to specifically address the plight of Nova Scotians individuals and families who are continually forced to balance their need for groceries and other essentials with the need to heat their homes. Chair now recognizes the Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to a constructive debate on this issue that I bring forward tonight. The question that needs to be asked, Mr. Speaker, is whether this government is going to help lower-income Nova Scotians make ends meet this winter. We're approaching $100 in oil. Record prices for home heating fuel will not be far behind. The NDP long fought the HST being charged on home heating fuel as an unfair tax on what is an absolute essential for many families during our cold winter months. The NDP did not support or suggest that the Keep the Heat program be cut. Now the government will try to confuse the issue by stating that they're helping lower-income Nova Scotians by removing the HST. However, in doing so, they just got rid of a tax that was wrong and got rid of the Keep the Heat program, a vital program that our most vulnerable Nova Scotians had come to rely on. We all have constituents that need help. They're already worried about how they'll make ends meet, Mr. Speaker. A targeted program to help our most vulnerable constituents is needed. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations suggested yesterday in these chambers that the HST rebate, he thinks, that on an average the rebates were higher than the present program. This, I would suggest, that many of our most vulnerable are not among the average. They are still in need, Mr. Speaker, and they are still struggling. Under the CUT program, the Keep the Heat program, eligible people who heated with electricity, coal, natural gas, and wood pellets received a $100 rebate. Those who used propane or oil were eligible for a $250 rebate. The rebates were open to families, including single-parent families, with incomes under $25,000, and single people with incomes under $15,000. There's no doubt that an assistance program would go a long way to help these families, Mr. Speaker. In addition to this economic support, there needs to be a program that will help lower-income Nova Scotians and seniors save money by helping them insulate their homes. We need to help seniors and others on fixed income save energy costs by helping to install insulation in aging homes, both for economical and environmental reasons. Some older homes, Mr. Speaker, don't even have insulation, or if they do, they have inferior products between the walls, such as newsprint, burlap, and seaweed, And much of that sits at the bottom of the walls, Mr. Speaker. We all know that it just dries up and falls. By providing assistance with insulation, Mr. Speaker, homeowners reap savings that will help them and the environment for years to come. It will also help, Mr. Speaker, to keep them healthy, both financially and physically. The cost per home for insulation could range from $1,000 to $2,500, but this type of measure would help homeowners save hundreds of dollars annually, as well as help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Again, Mr. Speaker, this province needs to send a message, a clear message to the citizens of this province that this government will no longer ignore the very real needs that our seniors and our most vulnerable face every day. A message that they will be reinstating the Keep the Heat program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Natural Resources.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite for her comments and bringing this very important subject to the floor. Mr. Speaker, there's no question that the cost of heating our homes is something that is challenging for all Nova Scotians, and particularly as the cost of energy is represented by the price of crude hovers around $100. And we're very pleased with the initiatives that the government has underway to assist Nova Scotians to deal with this very serious matter. No doubt, the rising oil prices are placing a burden on everyone. Unfortunately, it's a global trend that doesn't seem to be ending soon, and that's why government chose to put your energy rebate program in place. Mr. Speaker, your energy rebate program helps over 400,000 Nova Scotians with their home heating costs, and it does so automatically. The rising cost of heating one's home affects all Nova Scotians. Your energy rebate program is available to almost everyone who is responsible for paying a household energy bill. Mr. Speaker, we have chosen to provide this rebate at the point of sale. We have learned that Nova Scotians prefer a point of sale rebate over the more traditional application-based program. And we wanted the rebate to be instant, right at the point of sale, where it had the most immediate impact on all. We've worked hard with stakeholders, Mr. Speaker, to allow Nova Scotians to see their saving right at the point of sale for the majority of the fuels they use to heat their homes. In 2006-2007, the province invested $39 million to get this program up and running for Nova Scotians, more than double what we paid out under the Keep the Heat program. This year, we expect to provide Nova Scotians with more than $60 million in rebates, 4 times the Keep the Heat program. Mr. Speaker, prior to your energy rebate program, the province was offering another, more income-targeted program, the Keep the Heat program, as the member opposite has already referenced in her comments. In 2005, 2006, that was the last year for that program. To be eligible for Keep the Heat, individuals and families had to have incomes below $15,000 and $25,000 respectively, or anyone on income assistance or who received the guaranteed income supplement. Mr. Speaker, they also had to show that they paid their own heating costs. Therefore, renters were excluded from this program unless they paid directly for their own heat. Mr. Speaker, Keep the Heat had the following components: a $250 rebate on the cost of heating fuel or propane, a $100 rebate for other fuel sources like electricity, wood, wood pellets, natural gas, and coal, furnace maintenance service, a very proactive part of that program, in the form of a voucher for a furnace tune-up costing approximately $90. Energy efficiency initiatives consisting of an energy efficiency kit for all rebate recipients, and a thermostat replacement initiative for those heating with electricity. A furnace repair replacement program administered by the Department of Community Services and industry discounts. Mr. Speaker, when Keep the Heat was last developed in October of 2006, it was estimated that up to 74,000 households could be eligible for the program. In actual fact, only 43,000 applications were received in 2005-2006 under the program, of which approximately 40,000 received financial aid. So just a little over half actually applied for the rebate. After 2005-2006, the reality of the day made us reevaluate the Keep the Heat program and broaden it to help all Nova Scotians. This includes those with low incomes facing the rising cost of oil, which is being felt across the globe. And that help came in the form of your energy rebate program. However, Mr. Speaker, we cannot look at the Your Energy Rebate program in isolation. Of all the government initiatives in place and being undertaken by government to help our most vulnerable, initiatives from Conserve Nova Scotia include the Nova Scotia EnerGuide for Houses program. Under this program, Mr. Speaker, low to modest income Nova Scotians may apply to have the full cost of an EnerGuide assessment rebated. They are eligible for this program if they have a single income of less than $25,000 per year or a family income of less than $40,000 per year. All participants in the Nova Scotia EnerGuide for Houses program, Mr. Speaker, get an energy savings kit. These kits include items like the CFLs, those are the lights, weather stripping, and the LED night lights. When installed, these items save homeowners almost $100 in energy costs. Very significant, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these were in fact many of the elements included in the Keep the Heat program. There is also an additional $400 top-up grant for those who complete their energy assessments. In total, the province is investing $300,000 in this program. Another program being offered, Mr. Speaker, is the Residential Energy Affordability Program. This is a pilot program that installs energy efficiency upgrades in low-income homes at no charge. More than 100 homes spread over the 4 regions of the province are being retrofitted. The province is investing $650,000 in this program, a very enlightened approach to help those that participate. Mr. Speaker, these are just some of the measures we have taken to reduce the financial burden on consumers, as well as the harmful effects of greenhouse gas emissions that have on our environment and our economy. As well, the Department of Community Services has programs to help low-income Nova Scotians replace furnaces. The $4 million Expanded Home Repair Adaptation Program is designed to help senior citizens with home safety and health issues. This includes the repair and maintenance of furnaces. Mr. Speaker, Community Services also offers furnace repairs through programs such as the Senior Citizens Assistance Program and the Provincial Home Energy Repair Program, 2 programs very much appreciated by low-income Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, while there is no doubt that the higher cost of home fuel does make it tough for everyone, especially those with low incomes, we are faced with the reality that government does have finite resources and many competing priorities. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, we must invest wisely and make sure that we get the maximum benefits of those investments for Nova Scotians. That's why, Mr. Speaker, any measures that we put in place must be done in a fiscally responsible manner. As I've said earlier, Mr. Speaker, across government, there are many initiatives in place that are targeted to help Nova Scotians to cope with the rising cost of oil, and indeed, Mr. Speaker, all forms of heating their home. Mr. Speaker, through Conserve Nova Scotia, we're trying to help those consumers, all Nova Scotians, learn how to make better use of their energy, how they heat their home, how they can save money, and how they can also help the environment while they're making sure that they stay home stay warm in the winter. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, we must always be mindful to balance our priorities and investments in ways that make sense. We must be responsible. We must implement initiatives in a balanced and a coordinated way, being mindful of the programs and services already in place, and of course, the dollars that are available for additional investments. Mr. Speaker, in view of the fact that this government is now directly through the new program, the Your Energy Rebate Program, is putting $60 million directly into the hands of Nova Scotians. In fact, 4 times what was distributed through the Keep the Heat program, and that it is an automatic point-of-sale program where there is no application. Mr. Speaker, I think that Nova Scotians have spoken loudly and clearly on this, and they endorse the government's program. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be sharing my time with the member from Kings West. Well, as I seen this debate come up this evening, I had no intention of speaking in the late debate this evening, but when I seen the topic of today's discussion, I had to speak on this. I've had individuals come and see me with tears in their eyes. Last year or the previous years when they had the Keep the Heat program, that money that came in for that program meant they could heat their home for a good part of the winter. Somebody that's very thrifty and keeps the heat turned down, it was a major, major impact in their household. Those same individuals, the small amount just say they saved directly on the GST, which was touted by both the Conservative Party and the NDP Party as being the savior of everything, didn't really help those people and will never help those people. Just simply put, it will not. And I think that they've started to realize that now. The other parties have started to realize that. The real thing is the Keep the Heat program was a good program. It did give funds to people to buy heat, and in some cases even buy groceries that month. And that was very, very important. The program now is against everything in energy conservation you could imagine. The more oil you burn, the better break you get on the taxes. So it just doesn't make sense. The government hasn't done anything to promote wind energy. They put a regressive tax bill through here on property taxes. They don't make the lines available for windmills, for instance, or other sources of alternate energy to use the power lines or be able to sell the power at a very reasonable rate so you can get a return on your investment. The key in this province is low-cost energy. If we had low-cost energy, we wouldn't be having this discussion about Keep the Heat. We wouldn't be having a discussion about taking GST off the fuel. If we had low enough energy costs in this province, which we can produce here, which is possible to do, take a lot of investment, a lot of initiative, and a lot of forward thinking. Unfortunately, this government or the NDP, neither one have that ability. It doesn't appear. But we have to move forward in this regard. It's incumbent on us. If we can get alternate energy sources that are cost effective, it helps our environment through greenhouse gas reduction, it helps our people, helps our industries, and it makes the province a cleaner, safer, and stronger economy. All the things that we all strive to do. And it's so simple. It is so simple to do some of these things, but there's no initiative to do them. It's always give a tax rebate on this, give a tax rebate on that, or whatever the case may be. And long term, short term, some of those things work well. The Keep the Heat program is one example that worked quite well. But in the long term, it doesn't cure the problem. The price of fuel goes up, and as my honourable colleague from the government indicated, we have no control over the price of oil in this country. There's nothing we can do about it. We just simply have to hope that we get the best deal we possibly can from the oil companies if indeed you're heating with oil. There needs to be more aggressive processes put in place for alternate types of heat and fuel, but energy efficient and environmentally friendly things. So when I go back to and see the people that have come to see me about this and asked about where the Keep the Heat program goes, it just breaks my heart to see that happen. And you take something from somebody, it's like giving them a meal and saying tomorrow you're not going to have a meal again or maybe never again. and they haven't made provision or don't have the ability to make provision to have that meal. That's really what has happened here, and it's very unfortunate that that's the case. And, you know, we have a lot of people in this province for no reason or no fault of their own over the years haven't been able to, particularly seniors with a very low income and a pension situation, where pensions in the province weren't important in this province or didn't appear to be. And at one time you didn't need a good pension because you're pretty well self-sufficient, but that's not the case anymore. So you get that generation and generation that's coming. A lot of people don't have good pensions. So as these costs go up, people lose their homes, they don't eat properly, they get ill, and they can't heat their homes properly, and all those things. So we've got to come up with a long-term solution to this, and the solution has got to be lower cost energy. And there's ways to do it. There's all kinds of ideas out there, and some of those things are proceeding now, but not nearly fast enough. In this country, we have tremendous resources, and those resources we have to use to help the people in this country, and also to give our economy a real boost. If you get low-cost energy, everybody benefits. And I'm very disappointed that the government reduced this or eliminated the Keep the Heat program. The GST helps the people that have the most money, and anyone that appreciates getting a tax break, but it shouldn't be at the expense of the people in this province that can't afford to pay for it. The people that are working poor and the seniors that are retired that can't afford to pay for it. And with that, I'll give the rest of my time to my colleague from Kings West.
Thank you. The honourable member for Kings West has approximately 4 minutes left.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm certainly pleased today to rise and speak for a few moments on the topic of the Keep the Heat program. What I felt was strong about this program is that it is a targeted program. And while the member opposite, Minister of Natural Resources, spoke in terms of 74,000 were available, 43,000 applied, 40,000 received. Of that 40,000 who received it, this in many ways was a lifeline. And that's why I say a targeted audience received that $200. And I feel that at a time when we have very volatile prices of heating oil, this is a great transition support during our Nova Scotia winters. I agree with my colleague that we have to look at long-term solutions. We have to look at ways where we can stabilize our heat cost. And if we could move wholesale to an electrical system supported by renewable energy, like our neighbor province, Prince Edward Island, who by 2020 will have 100% renewable energy, and which will mean they'll be able to stabilize their prices and incomes and heating costs will come a little bit closer together. The thing as well, the real benefit of the Keep the Heat program is that it was and should be an annual program. The Salvation Army program to the Good Neighbor Energy Fund is only available once every 5 years. And this is what made the Keep the Heat program so valuable there year after year for the fixed income, the low income, and the seniors of this province. I also feel that that government, and perhaps all of us as MLAs, should be encouraging Nova Scotia Power to implement a program in Nova Scotia similar to the one that Emera has with Bangor Hydro, where they have a lower electrical rate for low-income citizens through Maine. And for those using that means of heat, it again provides a benefit to them. One of the things that has happened in this particular year, and what makes some type of support very needed, is the fact that home heating oil has gone up by 16 cents a liter just since last year. And that impact of 16 cents just today from my office, my constituency office, the following have called this office requesting help with oil. Social services will do nothing to assist these people. It's an epidemic right now in this area. And just in today's calls, to add to an already growing list, I received 10 names of people who need. We have a crisis on our hands this winter with support to low-income Nova Scotians. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will take my place.
Thank you. I want to thank all the honourable members for having taken part in tonight's late debate. The House will recess for approximately 5 minutes, where we will continue afterwards with debate on Bill number 10. The House stands recessed for 5 minutes. Order, please. I call the House back to order. We will resume second reading on Bill number 10. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Justice Critic for the Liberal Caucus, it gives me great pleasure to stand in my place and make a few remarks on Bill number 10, the Gunshot and Stab Wounds Mandatory Reporting Act. Mr. Speaker, before I get into the exact details of this act, I remarked on the closing statements by the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure Renewal referring to Bill number 7. And Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to remind this government that the role of the opposition is to make sure to provide a different perspective where available and to allow Nova Scotians, allow this House to consider pieces of legislation and the statistics surrounding some of the ideas being put forward. Mr. Speaker, when I spoke earlier on that specific piece of legislation, I provided statistics, I provided research, and I provided a different perspective than what had been provided by the Minister of Justice. Now, Mr. Speaker, when a member of the opposition raises such concerns about government legislation, to suggest that those members of the opposition are somehow soft on crime or that they're not pro our police, I think is completely irresponsible for a Minister of the Crown to make any sort of suggestion at members of the opposition. Mr. Speaker, the members who stood up here spoke freely, as they should be able to do in a free and democratic society, and they gave different perspectives. At the end of the day, passage was given on second reading, but it was made clear by members of the opposition that there are different sides to the proposals being put forward in government legislation. And to suggest that somehow that is anti-crime or that is soft on crime, I think was irresponsible for those comments to be made by a minister. And I would strongly suggest that if that's the approach that's going to be taken by this government or by these ministers on their legislation, we are going to be here for a long time during this session if that's the attitude that is going to be taken. Mr. Speaker, photo radar, for example, is a concept that is backed by many people, but statistics show it does not reduce accidents. That is the reality. Police officers have spoken clearly that they believe that photo radar is only effective if a police officer is there with that photo radar. That is just one of the other examples that I've given, Mr. Speaker. We have research that's been done in Alberta, for example, which shows that clearly photo radar has not decreased fatalities in there. Well, Mr. Speaker, on this bill, I'm going to give you examples as well, that there is another perspective to what is being brought forward, and that is the role of the opposition. And shame on a minister to suggest that we should not be given a different perspective and that somehow we are soft on crime by giving a different perspective. Mr. Speaker, this bill, once again, is a reactionary bill. It's an after-the-fact bill. The crime has taken place, and they want it to be reported. Time and time again, we have spoken in this House about the need for this government to look at preventing crime. Yet we do not see crime prevention strategies, we see reactionary strategies. It's too late. When someone shows up at a hospital with a gunshot or stab wound from a criminal activity, the crime has taken place. So that's not prevention, Mr. Speaker, and it's important to point that out, that this is once again the government trying to react to situations rather than taking positive action. Mr. Speaker, the bill that is being presented here is similar to Ontario legislation, but where it significantly differs is that Ontario legislation simply deals with gunshots. It does not deal with stab wounds. Mr. Speaker, the other important thing to point out that it seems that the Ontario government used the same approach as the government is using here. They introduce legislation and then they go out and do the consultation afterwards. Ontario, for example, received royal assent on this bill on June 13, 2005, and yet the regulations still haven't been finalized. So almost over 2 years later, the bill is still not in effect because the regulations have not been finalized. Mr. Speaker, in this case, it's my understanding that, in fact, during the debate on the Ontario legislation, there was even an attempt to amend it by including stab wounds, and it was defeated. So we have to ask ourselves, why was it defeated? And why was it not included in Ontario? And what were the concerns around not including stab wounds in that specific province? Our bill, though, is actually identical to the Saskatchewan legislation, which does include stab wounds and which did come into effect in September of this year with regulations, ironically. Mr. Speaker, the bill that's been presented to us in Bill 10 would require every hospital, clinic, or facility that treats someone for a gunshot or stab wound shall disclose that fact and the person's name and location of the hospital, clinic, or facility. Mr. Speaker, it's expected that disclosure would be made orally as reasonably possible without interfering with treatment or disrupting regular hospital activities. And I do note the comments that were made by the member from Sackville-Cobequid, who himself, having a career in the medical profession, certainly raised concerns as well at the importance of treating the patient first rather than feeling a duty to have to pick up the phone to report suspicious activity. Mr. Speaker, the bill in itself says that no action lies against a person making disclosure if done in good faith. That is a protection, but I will speak a bit more about my concerns over a lack of protection in this bill. The bill itself provides extensive regulatory powers for the minister, similar to what was done in Ontario, and which again, Mr. Speaker, goes to the concerns that I've raised, not only with this bill, I've raised with Bill number 7, and I've raised with other pieces of legislation, that there's too much regulatory power being left in the hands of the Cabinet to be decided in the back rooms, outside of the legislature and outside of the supervision and approval of the House of Assembly and the elected members of this province. As has been mentioned by the Minister in his opening comments, there has been support in calling for this type of legislation. When we asked the question during the bill briefing of who has been consulted, we were led to believe that there had been a significant amount of consultations which had taken place. Yet, Mr. Speaker, after it was introduced, we had the head of the NSGU say that they'd never been even made aware that this legislation was coming forward. How could there have been consultation for the bill coming to this House if the head of one of the province's largest unions, which would be impacted by this, was never even made aware of this type of bill coming forward? Mr. Speaker, once again, we as members of the Liberal caucus want to do our part to make sure that criminal activity is reported and is being addressed. On the flip side, one has to look at the very important concerns over the privacy of innocent victims who are the victims of an innocent accident which has nothing to do with criminal activity, who may suddenly be reported and become suspects of criminal activity through no fault of their own. We need to make sure that this legislation provides those necessary safeguards, and unfortunately, the legislation is silent on that issue. Mr. Speaker, as well, the other large concern on this is that we have no specific indication of what protection is going to be there for the healthcare workers who are expected to report this to police. Mr. Speaker, our healthcare workers are there to help save lives and to help individuals who show up who need medical attention. We as legislators must make sure that we are not putting our healthcare workers at risk by asking them to become involved in reporting potential criminal activity. Mr. Speaker, the bill does not provide the safeguards in its current form that I feel are necessary to make sure that in no way, shape, or form will this put any of our healthcare workers, our administrators, or our hospitals, or any medical facility at risk by being required to report these kinds of activities. Mr. Speaker, I realize that the Minister has indicated there was a request that came from the Halifax Regional Police Department for this legislation. Its point was made that there is crimes that sometimes go unreported because the hospitals aren't necessarily required to report gunshot victims or stab wounds. Mr. Speaker, what I'd be curious is if the Minister would have given us some numbers. How many crimes does the Halifax Regional Police Department or any other police department feel has not been properly investigated because of the fact you had an injured party that was never reported to the police? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 50? Is it 100? How much of an issue is this, Mr. Speaker, that we are being asked to force healthcare workers to identify individuals who they have concluded may have been the victims of gunshot wounds or stab wounds as a result of criminal activity. Unfortunately, those numbers have not been provided, and I would hope that as the debate continues on this bill, that the minister would stand in his place and tell us exactly what kind of statistics are involved here. Let's keep in mind as well, Mr. Speaker, we cannot forget that under our justice system, even though you are reported to have been the victim of a gunshot wound or a stab wound, there is nothing compelling you to speak to the police when they arrive. And we have seen cases, Mr. Speaker, not that long ago, where we had a stabbing victim at a hospital here in HRM that refused to speak to the police. This was an apparent victim of a stabbing who refused to talk. And my understanding is to this day has still refused to talk. So this in no way is going to force people to have to disclose to the police that they have been the victim of a criminal activity. So, Mr. Speaker, this legislation, as I've mentioned, is not new legislation, and it's been done in other areas. It's my understanding that 45 American states have this legislation. Apparently, Manitoba, for example, is considering this legislation, but there is already some who are saying that is not the right way to go. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, our focus and this government's focus needs to be on crime prevention. And we're still not hearing anything on crime prevention. We hear reactionary tales, and reactionary tales are too late. And again, this bill, I fear, is going to leave Nova Scotians with the impression that somehow what we are doing with this legislation will prevent crime. Mr. Speaker, it does not appear that it will do that, because it's reacting after crime has already taken place. And Mr. Speaker, there's already statistics coming from the U.S. which show that there are different institutions which are refusing to report these types of activities to the authorities. And the question becomes, what action will this legislation or will this government take against healthcare workers or facilities which refuse to report these kinds of statistics or these kinds of incidents to the proper authorities? Mr. Speaker, there are different statistics and sometimes confusing statistics about the rate of crime here in Nova Scotia, in Canada, and in other provinces. We know that there are problems here in this province, and it's important that we put the necessary measures in place to be able to address crime as much as possible. But Mr. Speaker, again, as I said in my opening remarks, when legislation is brought forward to this House, it is our duty as opposition members to present as much information as possible, not only to the members of this House, but to Nova Scotians, so that they can take in all of the facts and determine whether it is a proper approach to take. And Mr. Speaker, when we've talked about other legislation, when we've provided statistics, when we've provided reports which are published about whether a certain incentive is going to work or not, ministers of the Crown should be not taking offense at that. They should be considering the statistics which are out there. It is one thing to be told by the police that they believe this is the answer. It is something else when statistics are shown from other jurisdictions which conclude it wasn't the answer. If we're going to move forward on these types of changes as a province, let's do so with an open mind. Let's do so by looking at the experience of what's been done in other jurisdictions. Let's look at the statistics of what the outcome has been, and let's learn from that. But to simply stand here and say, I'm right, you're wrong, and by you disagreeing with me, you're anti-crime or you're anti-police, is irresponsible for anyone to make that suggestion. We are here as an opposition to make sure to hold the government accountable, but to make sure that Nova Scotians can give us the input about whether they feel the government's approach is the right approach for Nova Scotia, and if it's the right approach to deal with crime here in this province. And Mr. Speaker, again, let us be realistic. In this province, for example, Mr. Speaker, we have seen a number of fatalities which have taken place on 100 series highways. Photo radar on highways of 70 kilometers maximum speed is not going to address those fatalities. So let us be realistic about what we are talking about and not confuse the matter. Mr. Speaker, this bill, I would like to see the Minister of Justice give us exactly the names of which organizations he is consulted with. This is the type of legislation which I believe we need to see the protections in the regulations that will be there for our healthcare workers and for innocent patients which show up at a hospital who are suddenly being accused of being the victim of a crime which may have been an accidental injury which occurred to them to start off with. Unfortunately, without seeing those regulations it is very difficult for us to have the confidence necessary that those concerns will be addressed. The other option, Mr. Speaker, is to seek amendments to the legislation as it currently exists to make sure those protections are in there rather than wait for regulations. Mr. Speaker, that will be up to the government as to whether they are prepared to look at those types of amendments now or risk there being further concerns with the passage of the legislation as it currently stands. Mr. Speaker, with those comments, I look forward to what is going to, the comments that we are going to receive on second reading. I certainly hope that we hear from healthcare workers, because at the end of the day, they are going to play an important role in this, and I want to make sure as a legislator that they feel they are properly protected and they are not being put into harm's way as part of their duties because of the new requirements that are being imposed upon them here in this legislation. So with those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I will be finishing and look forward to seeing this bill in front of law amendments for further discussion and possible amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll recognize the Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased on behalf of the Minister of Justice to rise and close the debate on this bill. We want to express our thanks and appreciation to members opposite for their comments and look forward to the bill proceeding to the next stage of debate.
Thank you. The Acting Minister of Justice is moving second reading on Bill number 10. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried.
Entitled, an act respecting the mandatory reporting of gunshot and stab wounds.
Order that this bill be referred to committee on law amendments. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That concludes the government business for the day. And I move that we do rise till tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And the government will call bills number 11, 14, 15, and 19 for second reading.
A motion for adjournment has been made. All those in favour of the motion? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. The House will rise to sit again tomorrow at 9 a.m. The House stands adjourned.